call this meeting of the Westwood Finance and Warrant Commission to order at 7:01 p.m. I'll grant permission to the Westwood Media Center to live stream and videotape the meeting. Ask if is there anyone else that wants to record the meeting? I don't think anyone else can on a Zoom. But I think we're good there. So welcome everyone. We have a lot on the agenda tonight. So we'll just start getting into things. So I think we have a whole bunch of people that will pull in at various points when they have to speak, and then we'll allow public comment through the chat. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll do roll call. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America,
and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and
justice for all. We got to work on that, Bill. Our synchronized Pledge of Allegiance wasn't there.
I could have a delay here in Buffalo. Allison, do you want to do the roll call?
Certainly. Bill Bruce.
Here.
Mike Gay.
Present.
Alex Yale.
Here.
Caitlin Jerzak. Christopher Marks.
Here.
Chris Pareda.
Present.
Christine Cannon.
She'll be late.
Okay. George Laham.
Present.
George Maroon. Sorry, I'm just checking the attendees as I do it too. John Carey.
Here.
Margaret Driscoll.
Here.
Mike Powers.
Here.
Brian Sturma.
Here.
Seth Fredrickson.
Here.
Susan Flanagan Cahill.
Present.
Thank you. That's everyone.
All right. Thanks, Allison.
Yeah.
You can while I give everyone my update, you can let in the select board and Chris and Stephanie, into all of them into the meeting, and Pat into the meeting.
And the charter review.
So, oh yeah, that's in that article too, in the charter review. So I'm not going to take a ton of time on my comments. So you'll see on the agenda, we have a lot to go through. We're going to go through the warrant articles. The select board's going to walk through their articles. Tim's going to discuss the unlimited school budget. And then we'll go through the planning board articles. What we'll do as we go through the articles is you can ask questions after kind of each one. Just raise your hand and Mike and I will do our best to manage. For the public out there, we will allow comments and questions after each section. So after the select board articles, we'll take questions. After the school budget, we'll take questions. After the planning board articles, we'll take questions. And you can use the Q&A to ask your questions, and Mike and I will keep on top of that and make sure we bring those up as we get to each piece. So with that, I think almost all of them. Waiting, you have Joe.
Yeah, there's some additional folks that need to come in. Caitlin's also in the waiting room as well. George Maroon as well, and others. Yeah.
So once we get everyone in here, I will turn it over to Joe, Marianne, Rob, along with Chris and Stephanie to kind of walk through the select board articles. Just give a minute to get everybody in.
Yeah, and Allison, let us know if you need to clarify any of the individuals that we need to let in for the charter review. And then also both the charter review and the select board will need to open their meetings.
Marianne, is this one Joe's away this week?
Yep, there's still quorum,
Okay.
so 2 out of the 3, so they'll still open.
perhaps I could.
I'll hand it to you, Marianne.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Great to see all of you. I will now call the select board meeting to order, and I will recognize that my colleague Rob Gotti is with us. So thank you for that. And before we start off tonight, I just want to thank all of you for your significant public service to the town, especially as town meeting season starts to heat up with your first public hearing. Thank you for your service to the town. We are here to present the select board articles tonight, and we're delighted to have a number of our town team members here to share with you on those. And I also just want to point out that our team members at the town also work full-time, as many of us do. But in weeks like this and many others during town meeting season, they're not only working a full day, they're also working a full night. And I just wanted to remind folks of that and to recognize and thank our very dedicated town staff. So with that, I will turn this over now to our town administrator, Chris Coleman.
Thank you, Mary.
Marianne, I apologize before Chris goes in. Do you need to do roll call and do anything official, or are you good with just?
I think we're good. Rob, you're here, right? Perhaps we can have you.
I just want to make sure.
On the record. We can't
He's
hear.
definitely here.
Definitely here. Can you hear me?
We can
there you
now.
go.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks. No worries.
So thank you. If I'm able to share my screen, I will do so. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, we're good, Chris.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Chris.
So good evening. Thank you for having us. We're here to discuss the select board articles. I just want to provide a quick update from last night's meeting to the FinCom. So at the select board's meeting last night, they did vote to use one of their miscellaneous articles, miscellaneous article number 3, which is now converted into select board article 10, and that is a street acceptance for Birch Lane. I will go over that shortly. In addition, the select board did vote to remove miscellaneous articles 11 and 12. So the select board have used 3 articles, miscellaneous 1, 2, and 3. Remaining are 4 through 10. And just to let everyone know, be discussing with the chair when he returns at the select board's meeting on March 10th to also discuss with the board the possibility of removing additional miscellaneous articles at that meeting. And then we would certainly provide the Finance and Warrant Commission with an update after that meeting on March 10th. So we are going over the select board articles. So select board articles 1 through 10, as I mentioned, just as a quick overview. Select board 1 is the Fire Station 1 project. And Mr. Chair, if I'm not mistaken, there is a scheduled special hearing for that, which is later in the end of April. Select board article 2 is for the charter review. I know you have members of the charter review committee here. I didn't know if you were planning on having them present. I know they presented at a previous FinCom meeting.
No, not unless folks have questions. They're here if folks have any questions on the article.
Okay. So unless I hear it, Mr. Chair, unless you ask me to stop, I'll just continue on if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
So as far as select board article 3, this is the prudent investor rule. And I was going to ask, is.
I'm here, Chris. Yes,
Okay,
I'm here.
Okay. So Stephanie, if you could go over select board article 3, and what I'll do, Mr. Chair, is let me just move down to some of the language for select board article 3. So you can see what is in the current draft language for the warrant.
Great, sure. You want me to go over it now, Chris?
Yes, please.
All right. So the language for this article reads, to see if the town will vote to accept the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 54, to allow town trust funds to be invested in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 203C, which is the so-called prudent investor rule. So I'm going to sort of try to break this down as to what that really means and what the changes would be if this local option were adopted. So currently, right now, today, we must follow Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 54, when investing any of our trust funds. So basically, this means that it allows for depositing in banks as well as investments on what is called the legal list. So the legal list of investments in Massachusetts is a list of interest-bearing obligations that any entity can invest in, including stocks, bonds, and notes. So this is a list that is issued by the state annually on July 1st, and it's currently very restricted. Just as an example, there are only 22 common stocks on this year's list. So the acceptance of this Chapter 203C, aka the Prudent Investor Rule, through a local option at town meeting would allow for a broader range of investments. So it's a legal standard that requires fiduciaries like trustees managing trust funds, which, just to highlight, this would only apply to our trust funds here, to invest assets with the same care and prudence that a reasonable person would use when managing their own investments. This applies to investment and management of trust assets. There's no obligation to do so if this local option is accepted. What it would basically mean is that trust fund investments would not be restricted to the legal list as it is today. So a broader range of investments would be allowed. The town would continue, of course, to invest responsibly, use our qualified financial advisors for guidance as we do right now, and also follow our own investment policy, which, if this were adopted, would need to be updated, which is perfect timing because we'll be looking at our financial policies in the fall. So we would update those with any adoptance of this local option. And I'm happy to take any questions on that. Or we can wait till the end. I don't know, Chris, what you want to do. Questions now, or do you want to keep going?
We can take questions. Like, does anyone have any questions on that? Go ahead, Chris.
So Stephanie, as a professional money person yourself, what's your view of this? I mean, is this a good thing for the town? It obviously, as you explained it, it broadens significantly what we can invest in. Is that a good thing, or should we stick to the list?
I do think it's a good thing. I think the list is currently very restrictive. That's been in practice for decades now. This legislation went into effect in 2023. A lot of towns in Massachusetts have been bringing it to town meeting since then, as well as through a home rule petition. So we're definitely not the first to do this. Just some towns I have written down. Arlington, Newton, Norton, Duxbury, Cohasset. I know I have a couple more. We're not the first to do this. It is something throughout Massachusetts that's now being regularly adopted. Like I said, nothing could change. I mean, we could just continue status quo. But when we work with our financial advisors, what would be nice is if, they had options for different investments and in securities and things like that outside of the list that is restricted right now. It would just give us further options as to what we can do, which is always a good thing when you're investing your money.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, if there are no more questions, we can move on to Select Board Article 4 if you'd like.
Sure.
Thank you. I don't believe she's in yet, unless I'm missing her, but would someone let Cheryl Hanley in? She's our new assessor. Please, thank you.
Yep. Here we go.
Welcome, Cheryl.
Hi. Let's see. Start video. Okay, there we go. Hi, everybody.
Mhm.
So under Select Board Article 4, the language reads, to see if the town will vote to accept the provisions of Mass General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 22J, which authorizes an increase in the amount of the exemption granted under Clause 22, Clause 22A, Clause 22B, Clause 22C, Clause 22E, and Clause 22F by 100% of the personal exemption amount, subject to the conditions of Clause 22J to be effective for the applicable exemptions granted for any fiscal year beginning on or after July 1st, 2025, or take any other action related thereto. And these are, Clause 22 exemptions are for disabled veterans. And this is prompted, this option has become available under recent legislation known as the HERO Act.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Cheryl.
yeah.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
Cheryl, I'll just state that the select board presented this to us in the past. This makes a whole lot of sense. Again, this is just 100% increase to the exemption that had already been in place. And so, again, this is personally, I feel this is a very good thing for the members of our community that this applies to.
Thank you. And you're exactly right. So these exemption amounts have remained unchanged for decades, really. So the most common exemption available is for disabled veterans, anywhere from 10 to less than 100%, which is currently a $400 exemption. So if adopted, that exemption amount will double to 800, which I believe will be so much more advantageous for our valued veterans.
Just one quick reminder to the public as we're going through these. If you have a question, again, please state your name and your address and your question, and then we will do the best to scan, see if the questions are there, and then present it to the speakers.
Okay.
Thanks, Cheryl.
I think we can go on to the next one.
Cheryl,
Thanks,
thank you very
Cheryl.
much.
Thank you.
So, Select Board 5 is an all alcohol license. And I believe Nora Lockney is going to be presenting this to you this evening.
I think we have to let her in.
I'm in.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hey, Nora.
Hi. So this is an article that as is being proposed by the select board at the request of Wegmans to allow the town to grant all alcohol Section 15 licenses to grocery stores greater than 20,000 square feet in size. And we have two grocery stores that fit that criteria now, Wegmans and Roach Brothers. Roach Brothers has not yet asked for this type of license, but we imagine that if town meeting authorizes the select board to petition the general court, and then the general court grants the ability for licenses, that both Wegmans and Roach Brothers would likely be interested in this type of license. They both currently have licenses that allow the sale of wine and malt beverages, and this would allow them to exchange that license for a license for all alcohol sales.
And Nora, I know that we covered this in the previous discussions, but Target would not qualify because the grocery portion is under the 20,000 square feet.
That's correct.
Got it.
Mike,
And
Bill,
we have three other licensees that have small grocery stores in town that also would fall under the 20,000 square feet.
Bill or Mike, can I ask a
Seth.
question?
George, then Seth. Seth has his hand up too.
Nora, usually liquor licenses are X amount of dollars per year, at least in the city of Boston. How much additional revenue would we be getting by expanding the liquor licenses for both, in theory, Roach's and Wegmans?
So the select board have to revise their regulations if town meeting does authorize them to go to the general court to include this type of license. I would expect it would be no less than the current licenses for all alcohol sales in restaurants, which is $5,000 per year per licensee. For all alcohol sales, it's $5,000. For beer and wine only, it's $2,500. So I would imagine that the board would carry forward those same fees or create larger fees.
And that's the annual fee. There's no initial, like a liquor license in Boston can range from 60,000 to 200,000. That,
Yeah, it's a very different type of liquor license in Boston than it is here. The town of Westwood does not allow the transfer of licenses, so the licenses themselves don't carry value. Boston, the license has value because it can be sold from one business to another.
thank you.
So we charge license fees that are commensurate with the town's expenses in having the business sell alcohol.
Thank you.
So my question,
Beth?
same as the previous time, but if you can clarify, why word this and structure this in a way that benefits two specific companies versus having an article that helps to help small businesses, helps bring other businesses to the town? Why structure this in a way to benefit only two specifically named businesses?
So it's structured to benefit grocery stores over 20,000 square feet, and we currently have 2 of them. That doesn't mean that we would be limited to 2 licenses. The state issues licenses based on a population of towns. So right now, Westwood's population would qualify us for up to 4 licenses. So the town could obtain permission to grant up to 4 licenses, or if they petition the town for more, petition the general court for more than that, they could obtain more than that. But the select board are only interested in granting licenses to large grocery stores. Keep in mind that alcohol sales currently, just the beer and wine sales in a grocery store, is limited to no more than 30% of the floor area of that grocery store. And the grocery store is required by the town's regulations to sell a significant quantity of specific materials, produce, meat, dry goods, and they're specified in the regulations. If one of those smaller stores that's less than 20,000 square feet was to increase its alcohol license to have not just beer and wine, but also all alcohol, they would likely run into a storage problem. Our smaller grocery stores are already experiencing some storage constraints that our health division has had concern with over the years and would not like to see that further exacerbated.
Yeah, but isn't that their decision as a business? I guess why is there a specific reason for the select board to make this determination?
I think that's the select board's job to make sure that what it's doing is of benefit to the health and safety of our residents.
And then I think, Chris, I saw your hand up, and now I see it gone, but did you have a question? Oh,
No, Seth asked the same question I was going to ask.
okay.
Thanks, Seth.
Looks like we do have one question. Oh, sorry. Nope. Never mind. We're good.
Mr. Chair, are there any other questions any additional questions for Select Board 5 at this time?
Doesn't look like it, so I think we can go on, Chris.
Yep. All right, Nora, thank you very much. So articles, Select Boards 6 and 7 are regarding Conant Road Culvert Project, and Town Council Pat Ahern is going to be presenting these this evening.
If you recall, we're looking to replace 2 aged culverts on Conant Road, and there's 2 properties that we need to do work on. We've reached agreement with the first property for a voluntary construction easement. And we're very close to reaching agreement with the second property. I don't want to jinx myself for the same thing. It's a temporary construction easement that'll allow us to increase the culvert so that we can ensure that our sewer pump down there does not get flooded, and that the street does not, and the area does not get flooded. And if you recall, we're waiting to see if we get a grant to pay for this project. I'm pretty close to finishing the actual warrant article language, but 7 has 2 languages right now, depending on if we can complete the negotiation and they agree to a voluntary taking.
Chris, you have a question?
Yeah, Pat, it appears that the work on the culvert pertaining to Select Board 7 is on a private driveway.
Yeah, it is.
So does this mean we're using public funds to help a private landowner
No,
fix their
no,
driveway?
no. What we're doing is we're using public funds to replace the culvert under the driveway, and we have to repair the driveway afterwards. That's kind of our duty. You have to put the property back to where it was.
And not better, though.
Not significantly better, no.
You know, this is just as a footnote. This is the kind of information that I wish I could have seen last year when this project came before the Finance Commission. But thank you very much for providing it now.
Thanks, Chris. Does anyone else have any more questions?
No public questions either.
On to the next.
So Select Board Article 8, this is to accept Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 41B, payment to public employees by direct bank credits. This is a direct deposit, Mass General Law. With the well-intended work of prior Westwood team members and prior administration, there was a number of changes made to reduce cost, and one of them was a direct deposit. Recently, we found that the town hasn't completed the process yet by accepting the Massachusetts General Law. So what we're looking to do here is to dot the i's and cross the t's, present this to town meeting, hopefully for their support, and then we would then have dotted our i's and crossed the t's. So there was just one step that was missed with the prior administration when this was initially implemented.
So Chris, just to be clear, we are already practicing direct deposit.
Yes.
Okay, thank God. Great. And this is just a procedural thing to make sure that we're following mass law. Perfect.
Correct.
I think we can keep going, Chris.
Okay. I can ask Nora to rejoin us. This is regarding Home 2 hotel tax increment financing or a TIF agreement. Is Nora back with us?
I am,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
So this article is has been proposed to encourage the development of one of two remaining parcels at University Station. This one is at 100 Station Drive. And there's been a proposal for several years for that site to be redeveloped for a 130 plus room hotel. The proponents received their approval for the development from the planning board in, I believe it was April 2022. And they have been attempting to build the hotel at that site ever since. But partially due to the issues that came about during COVID, partially due towards material supply issues and the increasing cost of construction, they have been unable to move forward. So I've been working with the hotel group for quite a while now, and I spoke to the select board and encouraged them to consider a tax increment financing program, which they did. At their meeting on January 28th, the select board chose to go forward with an article that would allow voters to consider granting the authority to the select board, or confirming the authority that the select board has to grant a TIF to this group to allow for the construction of the hotel. And for how that would benefit the town, the example I proposed was a 10-year tax increment financing package with an exemption beginning at 50% in the first year and decreasing by 5% year after year until it goes away at the end of the 10 years. And that would be an average tax exemption over the 10-year period of 27.5%. What that would do, however, is it would enable the town to to reap the rewards of having a building at that site. So the tax assessed value of the property would raise significantly. There would also be personal property taxes that would come along with that, as well as very significant hotel and meals tax. So to give you an idea, looking at the property as it sits now, it's a vacant parcel of land. The tax payment that would be due in fiscal year 25 on that parcel is approximately $95,000. If there was a hotel that was developed on the property, the receipts due to the town, which would include the property tax for the building and the land, as well as the personal property tax and the hotel and meals tax, would net far greater than that. It would net over 600,000 a year, even with an exemption in place. So what we're talking about is if we do nothing and the land sits vacant for another 12 years, we could expect over this 10-year period to reap about 1.4 million in tax payments on the property. But if we grant a TIF, we allow this incremental small tax relief for the property owner over that same period. Instead of about $1.4 million, we would get $8.4 million in total receipts. So I think the benefits to the town are significant just on the benefits related to that property. Add to that the benefits of the people who are staying in that hotel, the people who are working in that hotel, spending money at University Station and at other properties in town. I think the benefits are even greater than that. So I believe the select board, all three members of the select board were in agreement and are supportive of tax increment financing for this project. And they're recommending that the town meeting vote to approve, to grant them, confirm their authority to grant a TIF. I'll also point out that we do have in the audience representatives from the company that is interested in building the hotel. If you have any specific questions that I can't answer, they may be able to answer them.
Thanks, Nora. Does anyone think have a question on this? I know we've discussed it a bit before.
I mean, Bill, I'd like to hear from the potential developing company.
Okay, can we?
Right.
George, what in particular do you want to hear?
Can you help me?
Number of rooms, size of the parking lot, what kind of traffic they're anticipating it will increase. Being somebody that lives near the area, I would be curious about that.
So I can answer the number of rooms. I believe it's 131 rooms. This was a project that was approved by the planning board in 2022. So we have the plans posted to the town's website if you want to look at them in greater detail. If you go to the planning board page, you can actually find the plans, count the parking spaces, see exactly what it is. This property is located on Station Drive, so right across from 101 Station Drive and right next to the Citizens Bank building. And the University Station project as a whole and the roads around that project were developed to handle the traffic. So we don't anticipate any significant increase in traffic. There was a traffic report that was done as part of the planning board's review in 2022, and that's also affixed to the website.
Thank you.
John?
Hi, Nora. How are you this evening?
Good. How are you?
Good. Is the right way to be thinking about this that if we do nothing, maybe the team eventually develops it, maybe they don't, but if we give this tax break, we get the tax onto the rolls sooner, which in aggregate benefits everybody?
Yes, and in fact, they have told us that they are ready to break ground in September if we're able to go forward with this TIF.
Yeah, so taxes sooner, jobs sooner. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Rob?
Thank you. And John, great question. That's a big part of the consideration as to why my colleagues and I support this. As you know, we've talked, at length about the need for increased commercial development as a way to provide some tax relief to residents. That's, all part of our split tax rate. And seeing this developed and realizing those benefits sooner is why we believe this is the right thing for us to do.
Thanks, Rob. Anyone else have any more questions on this one?
By the way, George
Anyone in the
Laham,
chat?
George Lehan, when I asked
Go
if
ahead.
there were things in particular that you wanted to hear, I just want to make sure that that there's no additional questions to the actual, the owners of Home 2. Not the owners, but the representatives.
Developers. Yep.
Developers. You're good?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, George.
Okay, Mr.
All
Chair.
right.
Would you like me to move on to?
Keep rolling, Chris.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
So Select Board 10, and Mr. Parade, I just want to point out, thank you for your recommendation last year. As you can see, we have included that recommendation again this year. But this is a street acceptance of Birch Lane. This was something that the Select Board voted on last evening to move it from a miscellaneous Article 3 to Select Board 10. As we've done with others, this is something that will have a betterment onto it. So the total cost, the betterment would be shared amongst the 5 properties on Birch Lane. And they will have, it's based off of frontage, so the amounts aren't exactly the same for all of them, but the total cost will be split between the town and those property owners. So the town's cost would be $27,500.
Seth, I see your hand raised.
Just out of curiosity, what does that mean annually from like a budget perspective? If you have that.
I'm sorry, Seth, I don't believe I'm understanding your question. What do you mean annually?
Well, you mentioned the betterment charges, I assume are to improve the road up to the town standards, right?
Correct.
Is there some then like annual cost per square foot of road that gets added to the DPW's budget as a result? I assume
No,
it's somewhat
thank you for
meaningful.
your
I just wanted to ask.
clarification. The $27,500 is a one-time cost.
Yeah. And then we never paid.
$27,500 that would be shared amongst those properties would be paid as part of a betterment through the real estate taxes.
Okay, and sorry, I didn't mean to jump on you. But like after that, if it's now a town road, doesn't the town then maintain it going forward?
Yes, the town would maintain it. The town is looking to, DPW is doing some work in this area using a lot of the Chapter 90 money that we receive from the Commonwealth. So that the DPW does a great job with grants. They just received a grant and the Select Board just supported it last evening, over $1 million for Washington Street. So this money for the work that they're looking to do in this area would also be used with Chapter 90 money.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And I have a feeling the answer to my question is immaterial, but this has come up a few times for like, hey, roads that were added to the town. Is there just a general cost per yard of road that the town uses for road maintenance annually? Just because like, as we continually add roads, I assume year over year, there's a maintenance cost. It might be immaterial. I'm just curious if you have that number.
I don't have that number, but I can certainly speak with our DPW director and have that for you at your next meeting.
Okay.
Or have an answer for you at your next meeting.
Yeah, no worries. All right, thanks, Chris.
No, thank you.
And I see Chris and then Rob.
So I wonder if Nora can jump in and give us any institutional reflection on how this subdivision came about. Because there's 5 homes here and they all occupy land that was the old Oak Hill nursery land. And they're all, I don't even know how 2 of them got built, except if they're using the frontage that property has on East Street, which is basically inaccessible from East Street.
Yeah,
so I
so
wonder
this project is before I was town planner. So I started with the town in 2008. I was on the Conservation Commission back in the mid-90s, I believe, when this was first put into place. So I don't remember all the details, but my recollection is that some of the lots were created by approval not required plan on existing streets. So that some of them were created on East Street, and 2 of the lots, I believe, were created by the extension of Birch Street. There may have even been a paper road at the time that had gone back there. I'd have to do some research to find out, but I believe this subdivision came into play in the early 1990s.
Yeah, if you had been around, Nora, I think we would have had a different result, but a better result. but I think you're right. I think what's now Birch Lane was laid out as a paper street. But essentially what we're doing is we're taking over what is now a private driveway between two houses and making it a public way and incurring the obligation to maintain it and snow plow it and the like. So I'm just curious as to what advantage there is to the town in doing this.
My understanding is that the town's share of Chapter 90 funds are based on the linear miles of roadway that are public in the town. So every time the town takes on an additional street as a public street, there is an incremental increase in the Chapter 90 funds that the town receives to maintain it. But I couldn't tell you what that percentage is. That's all something we'd need to hear from Todd.
All right, thank you.
Rob?
Yeah, just going sort of to Chris and Seth's question, I've never seen a cost per foot or linear mile or whatever Nora was just referring to with respect to taking on, but some of that is variable too. Obviously, we'd have to, if we were to give a number like that, it would probably need to be over, I don't know, a 10, 15-year period, as snow and ice can vary dramatically. And as we just heard from Nora, we do get Chapter 90 money allocated to us based on that linear mile. So, I don't know that the end result will be necessarily worth the effort on that, but I understand the question.
Mr. Chair, that would
Any other
complete the select
questions?
board articles.
That sounds
Um,
great. Go ahead, Bill.
Does the group, yeah, there's a couple things. So does the group have any questions, any more questions on any of the select board articles, or including the charter article as well? And if it's charter, let me know, we'll have them speak. I am not seeing hands going once, going twice. Sold. So before close the meeting, Mary Ann, there was one question that we got, not related to these particular articles, but Mike, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So I will read the question. I think everybody can hear me. Okay, Kathy Wallace, 283 Farm Lane. This is addressed to the FinCom. In your position of oversight and review of the budget, I urge the FinCom to consider the town's potential liability for not adding to the Westwood Fire Department staff for fiscal year 26. The Westwood Fire Department is understaffed according to a 2013 study that indicated that we need 10 more firefighters than we have today. This was confirmed by a 2023 study. I have advocated for 2 firefighters in the fiscal year 26 budget, but the select board does not see a path forward for the 2 firefighters in that budget. These 2 firefighters were cut from the fiscal year 25 budget as well. This can be a matter of life and death, as seconds matter in an emergency response. We cannot operate both ambulances 100% of the time with the current staffing levels. This exposes the town to legal issues if a resident has a subpar outcome or a firefighter is seriously injured as a result of understaffing. Thank you for the comments and question, Kathy. I don't know if anybody wants to address it.
I'm happy to address that briefly. And we have talked extensively about the issue of firefighter staffing at recent select board meetings. And as you will recall, for FY25, we took the step of adding 2 firefighter positions, not cutting 2. We added 2 firefighter positions in FY25. The reality is that we haven't been able to hire both of them. We recently hired one, and we are actively trying to fill that other position. There is a shortage nationally, and it's been a real challenge for the chief to hire. That said, as you well know, this is and has been a challenging budget year. And in order to add positions to the budget, it needs to be sustainable. And because we did not have a recurring revenue source, we did not feel that we could add positions. But we are committed to expanding the firefighter staffing. We, I think, also feel very strongly as a board that before that we would like to have a new station that is healthy and safe for firefighters to come to. And we've been, as you know, putting a lot of energy into the FS1 project for that reason. So thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thanks, Marianne. And
In
and thank
addition, I
you.
do believe that the chief at our meeting said that the department's priority at this time is the station. That's not to say that he wouldn't gladly take the 2 additional firefighters, but he stated quite clearly at our meeting that the department's priority was the station.
That is true.
And I'll just add that because the question was directed to the FinCom, Kathy, first off, thank you for your advocacy for the fire department. You have definitely been a voice in support of not only additional firefighter staff, but the FS1 project. So we very much appreciate that. And I think that both Marianne and Rob have covered some of the top points. We, the FinCom, have had a lot of discussions about this. And what is brought before us in the fiscal year 26 budget, we stand behind, and quite frankly, we consider what is before us. But again, thank you for your advocacy.
Mr. Chair, if there are-
Marianne, do you have to close your meeting?
I would. I'm actually going to excuse myself as I have other select board business to attend to tonight. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And I will second that motion out of necessity. Roll call, Rob?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.
Thank you for the
Thank you.
opportunity to present.
Thanks to all.
I'll remain with you guys if you like.
Yeah, sure. And thank you, Charter Committee. I know there weren't any questions, but we appreciate you all joining in case there were questions, either from the group or from the public. So thank you.
And hey, Pat Ahern, there's no need for the Charter Review to have opened their meeting because they weren't actively engaged.
That's
Or
correct.
is-
That's
Perfect.
correct. And they weren't all on the call either. So our quorum was not on the call that I could see.
Sounds great. Making sure we're not breaking any rules.
I appreciate that. It takes a village.
So next up is school budget. So Allison, can we allow Tim and Lemma as panelists? And I think some of the school board members are on as well.
Yeah, I know Tony Mullen is here as well too, and I was already promoted earlier, so I'm here for you, Bill. So,
Okay.
and if
Can't
you're
see
in
with all
Buffalo,
the names.
no, it's fine. And if you're in Buffalo, I can recommend a couple of good wing places for you while you're there. So just let me know.
All right.
So I know I'm joined here today by Lemma Jean-Baptiste. I see Lemma there, and then Tony Mullen from the school committee. I don't think I saw another school committee member in attendance. But I do want to recognize, obviously, their support of this. Thank you for here. And if you want me to just jump in, Bill, sorry, I should.
Yeah.
You can just jump in.
No,
without
no, go ahead.
Go ahead. So, so thank you for having us here today. So for those that I have not seen or interacted with a bunch before, Tim Pavlov, our superintendent, again, Lemma Jean-Baptiste, our director of finance and operations, and Tony Mullen from the school committee as well is here too. If you don't mind, if I can share my screen as well.
Yeah, sure. I think Allison's in control of everything, not me.
I've got it. So thank you.
Excellent.
So hopefully that's fine. So hopefully you can see everything there. And let me just put this into presentation mode. Thanks. So we're going to talk through the FY26 budget. Thank you for accommodating our schedule. The school committee voted to approve this just prior to our vacation on February 13th. So this was approved unanimously by the school committee after their public hearing on the 13th of February. Sorry, just to sort of walk through this. Building the FY26 budget, for those that were here a year ago, we did this in a very similar manner to what we had done last year. Our annual drivers are that we have to meet our contractual salary obligations. You'll see a slide about this in a second, but education is a people business. And by far the vast majority of our budget is in salary. We also need to meet other inflation impacted costs, but we'll particularly talk about transportation, a little nuance in utilities this year. We have to maintain class sizes consistent with school committee goals. We have to be responsive to the fluctuations of our student enrollment. And we'll see something in this year's budget that is reflective of that, but I'll also talk a little bit about where we may be heading long term. We need to address special education needs. Not only do we have the moral obligation to be consistent with our vision of having a collective responsibility for all of our students, there's also a lot of legal requirements to make sure that we're addressing our needs in special education. And ultimately, it's about how we can continue to make progress on our educational goals. We have a bridge strategy for district improvement this year. We just released our portrait of a graduate, which provides the vision, our educational vision for students going forward. And we're going to engage in our next long-range strategic planning this spring, and I'll talk about that more at the March school committee meeting. So in building the budget, we start with a level services budget. We assess our contractual salary obligations and our fixed cost. We respond to those enrollment changes I talked about, and then we identify strategic additions or reductions that are consistent with our goals. I said before, education is about people. 85% of our budget is salaries. And of that 85%, 70% is teachers. So, I mean, that is the vast majority of what we do. And we, again, in order to have high quality education, you need to have high quality educators working with our students. So on the fiscal year 26 budget, and by the way, Bill, I'm assuming you want me to go through the whole thing and then hear questions at the end, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Tim, let's go through the whole thing and then we'll let the group ask questions.
Okay, thank you. So the biggest cost driver, as I said before, is contractual salary obligations. We are currently in negotiations with both our teachers. That's obviously our biggest bargaining unit. We're also in negotiations with our administrative assistants for contracts that expire in 25. Our other units outside of custodians and BCBAs expire next year with the others, BCBAs are in active negotiations with teachers. Our custodians are 27, everybody else is 2026. We certainly see big cost escalation in both transportation and special education. And special education is both salary and non-salary, particularly tuition. This is where I'm going to pause for a second and say the financial impact is a 3.88% increase. Last year, when we presented the FY25 budget, I had talked about we had two non-replicable things that occurred in building FY25. One is we were able to make consolidation in our operating budget, or we're able to make savings in our operating budget thanks to the consolidation of Pine Hill. And the other is the fact that we actually saw special education tuitions go down in FY25 compared to FY24. That's not the case in FY26. And I'll talk about that later. And obviously, we're not consolidating Pine Hill again. Those operating savings were captured in FY25, and that capturing is rolled forward. That being said, we are coming in, that should say FY26 proposed budget increase. That's a typo. That budget increase is 3.52%, which is below that level services of 3.88. We do recognize that we need to make programmatic changes consistent with our priorities for improvement, but that we also have to maintain our fiscal responsibility to the community. And so that recommended budget is $58,761,682, which is consistent with the number that I know from our conversations through budget steering that Chris and Stephanie presented to the select board and to this committee as well. This just shows you historically what our percentage operating increases are. These numbers are pretty in line with a few exceptions. You might be wondering why I'm going back to FY16 and 17, but those were the university station years. Again, once those numbers are built in, they're baked in, and we don't get that increase every year. And the other outstanding one is FY24. That was just prior to my arrival. I know there were conversations about really challenging cuts that would have to be made, and we were saved by a significant influx in Chapter 70 money that year, which is not on the horizon. The governor's budget certainly, we continue to be a minimum per pupil aid district for Chapter 70 right now. So this shows you what that breakdown is. The largest, it's just shy of a $2 million increase from FY25 to 26. Again, the vast majority of that is our contractual obligations, is that net increase in salaries for existing personnel. You do see some fluctuations in and out, a little net reduction in overall student support staffing at Thurston, a little increase in instructional staff and supports at the high school, and then a reduction in instructional and admin support staff pre-K to 5. And then I'll talk about those non-salary accounts, and the most of that is tuition and transportation. And that just shows you the breakdown of those increases. And I'll talk about more in greater detail. This just shows you what these are as percentages. The special education number, again, is a significantly higher percentage. I think that while it is high, I've certainly seen significantly higher in other districts, but that number was negative a year ago. And that means that there is a pressure on us in this year's budget. And you see the utilities and facilities fluctuation. That's essentially a shift in funds from utilities into facilities based on some historical spending patterns. This is that same information, just showing all funds. This includes our grants. This includes our revolving accounts. And so you can see the net spending on special education is supplemented by our federal IDA grant. So FY26 is 2.9 without our grant funding and without circuit breaker. It's 4.1 with grant funding and with our circuit breaker revenue. So I mentioned that we need to be responsive to our enrollment considerations. There's no significant change in our enrollment in FY26 for high school or middle school. There's really not any enrollment driven in terms of a macro level in staffing based upon that. The overall elementary enrollment from 25 to 26 is consistent, but we are seeing a shifting in where those students are, not just by what building, but by what grade levels. And so we determine a number of sections not by the overall enrollment number, but by what that distribution is across schools and grade levels. And we actually were able to capture a couple of reductions in FY26 because of how that distribution rolled this year. I talked about this at length last year, the challenges we have with using census data predicting incoming kindergarten enrollment. Given that our FY25 methodology proved successful, we're using that same methodology for FY26, projecting level enrollment. And you can see here that while we were pretty steady from census to number of students that came from 2019 to 2023, those numbers jumped significantly, and the number of people that are filling out the census has dropped significantly. So this is my annual pitch that I'll make, that if you're out there listening and you haven't filled out your town census, please fill it out, because it allows us to have better tracking, at least on the school side as well, too, particularly if you have kids that are younger than kindergarten age. So when we talk about enrollment at the elementary level, we have class size guidelines from the school committee of 18 to 22 students in grades K through 3, 18 to 24 students in grades 4 through 5. And based upon the shift from last year to this year, there's a net reduction of 2 elementary classroom teachers, which is a savings of about $170,000. There's an addition of 1 FTE at Pine Hill. We anticipated this. That building has 4 classrooms in each of the grade levels 1 through 5. We only had 3 grade 5 teachers this year, but we had 4 grade 4 teachers. As those kids get older, they obviously need to go into the upper grades. So we are able to, we do need to add 1 teacher at Pine Hill, but we're actually capturing a reduction of 1 FTE each at Downey, Martha Jones, and Sheehan based upon the shifting enrollment patterns. This shows you what the number of students by grade level and by school are. And in parentheses, you see the number of classes per grade level per school. Again, the methodology we're using for kindergarten is we're assuming the same number of students next year as we have this year. And then we will adjust as need be, depending upon what those enrollment patterns are. So all of these are between those guidelines of 18 to 22 in grades K through 3 and 23 to 24 in grades 4 and 5. So as for staffing changes, I've talked about these in a couple of times already. They're in 3 major categories. It's student support staffing at Thurston. It's instructional and support staffing at the high school. It's instructional administrative support staff pre-K to 5. At Thurston, the number 1 priority that was an absolute necessity that we had to do is that we had to add a language-based special education teacher at Thurston. I've talked before, and I'll talk about this in a little bit. We have a number of in-district special education programs, substantially separate programs, which are a way to both meet our educational obligations, our moral obligations, and our legal obligations to students by trying to educate students in district when possible. So we'd create a program for students with language disabilities at Sheehan a number of years ago. The oldest students in that program are now in grade 5. So we now need to make sure there is continuity for that program as students move into Thurston. So we're adding 1 special education teacher for Thurston for that program in next year's budget. We're also adding a 0.4 adjustment counselor. We currently have 1.6 at Thurston. I've said it before, and I'm sure Emily said it as my predecessor before me. We are seeing, not just here in Westwood and not just in Massachusetts, but across the country, the increased student mental health needs. And so increasing the adjustment counselor at Thurston, particularly in those critical adolescent middle school years, is responsive to those needs, and brings our total at Thurston up to 2 full-time employees for adjustment counselors. To help offset this, we're able to reduce 2 instructional aides, and that's able to be realized through that careful analysis of student needs and how we're reconfiguring staff schedules to optimize their efficiency. Moving to the staffing changes at the high school, and I do want to recognize the budget books we initially delivered. This was a place where there was a little change from the January presentation at school committee to the final budget that was approved in February. So we're going to be adding a 0.6 FTE wellness teacher at the high school. This was a need that was identified through our curriculum review, particularly to help support students in both their physical and their mental health as they're getting ready to leave Westwood High and go out into college or career. So for next year, this is a 1 year of a 2 year for year 1 of a 2-year phase-in, where we will provide programming to students in grade 11 where it currently does not exist, and we'll need an additional 0.4 FTE in FY27 to continue that up into grade 12. So students will take wellness for 1 quarter each year in the junior year. That will be paired with their financial literacy class. I'm really excited. There's a lot of good public conversation about that requirement that we added for the current junior class to graduate. And in their senior year, the wellness class will be paired opposite their required civics class. We are reducing a 0.4 teacher in Mandarin. There is a 0.8 in the budget. There's a 0.6 in reality right now. And one of the things that we've identified is that Spanish and French are offered in middle school. Mandarin doesn't begin until high school, and we have really struggled to maintain enrollment. This year, there are only 9 students currently enrolled in Mandarin 1, and is just not a place where, given the budget constraints that we are under, we're able to continue that program in the current construct. But we want to be able to do a rethinking of the program to figure out how can we actually be responsive to what we identified in our curriculum review, and how can we build a more sustainable model going forward, working backwards from the desired goals on down, hopefully into middle school. This does maintain a 0.4 in the budget to support those students that are currently enrolled in Mandarins 1, 2, and 3. And then we're adding a 0.4 building substitute. We know there have been challenges with coverage at the high school, and so this increases that coverage to 2.0, commensurate with the number of building subs we have at Thurston and Pine Hill. At the elementary level, we're going to be reducing 2 FTE general education classroom teachers. I talked about that previously. We're going to be adding what's the equivalent of a 1/8 FTE administrative assistant at the preschool. But in reality, this is money that we have already spent on work that was additional hours that weren't budgeted. This actually memorializes that process, and it will be increased support to help with a change in our pre-K offerings. I know there was a lot of conversation in the community about this, so that this committee is aware. We've talked for a number of years about the challenge in the physical space limitations in our current preschool footprint of the high school. For next year, we are going to be adding a 4th preschool classroom that will be located in the unused kindergarten classroom at Pine Hill right now. That will help address some of those needs. We're still working through some of the pieces of that. But given the fact that our preschool staff will now be split across 2 campuses, we do need some additional support. And again, we're budgeting some of that money that was already spent historically. And then we are reducing a 0.4 FTE for an administrative assistant for registration. This was a school department historically subsidized a position in the municipal IT department, and we were able to absorb that needs through automating some of our processes and distributing the work among existing school department personnel. Talking about special education and non-salary changes, the most variable part of any district budget, whether it's Westwood, whether it's any other Commonwealth or any other community in the state, is special education. As I've said before, we've created several district-wide programs that allow us to educate almost all of our students in district. That number of fewer than 1% of students is not found in most places. And so that's a real credit to the programming we have here in district. But for those students that do attend programs that we are not able to service in district, the state's operational services division, I know Emily would have talked about this in FY24. They escalated those costs by a minimum of 14%. Last year it was 4.69%. This year it's 3.67%. And I want to recognize that OSD is not bound by the same 2.5 issues that communities are. So And I will also say that as a minimum, schools can apply to OSD for increase even greater than that. I know in at least one of those cases, one of those increases was accepted for a district or for a school that we have a relationship with. This shows the delta from FY25 to FY26 for residential tuition, day tuition, collaborative tuition. There's a significant increase in residential tuition, and that is just the variance and fluctuation of students. And then transportation, again, the out-of-district transportation is up significantly. We're able to save a little bit on in-district transportation, but transportation is a real challenge, not just in special education, but in general ed as well. So the overall net increase on the operating budget, if I go to this slide, if you add those two numbers together, it's 357,000. But in the budget, it's a $210,000 increase because we did see increased where I would apply an additional offset from circuit breaker revenue. Circuit breaker receipts come in based upon actual spent. And so the money we are spending offsetting in FY26 is money we collected in FY25 for tuitions we spent in FY24. And the state, if they fully fund tuition, which they have, will fund 75% of the delta between what's 4 times foundations funding, I'm just going to say roughly $50,000, and what the tuition is, that money comes back into the district. We are also doing a slight increase in special education contracted services of just shy of $10,000. And that is a level of staffing support to support that 4th pre-K classroom at Pine Hill for next year. I mentioned the special ed transportation increase. There's another $56,000 roughly increase in yellow bus transportation. That is our existing vendor contract. We are currently in year 3 of a 3-year contract with 2 one-year extension options at our discretion. Given the bidding climate around transportation, it's better for us to exercise that extension than to go out to bid right now. And then we are making a shift in the budget, an increase in building maintenance of $60,000, a decrease in electricity just to reflect some historical spending. And that's an electrical decrease at the high school. Some pieces about revenue assumptions. We are going to be, I mentioned circuit breaker earlier, our offset's higher by about $146,000. We do see some grant increases. The biggest of those is our IDA special education grant that comes federally. And then a little bit in some of our other grants around early childhood, METCO, and Title II. The school committee has voted a 3% increase to bus fees, athletics fees, and preschool tuition. And this chart just kind of shows where we are relative to tech districts and bus fees, and where we are relative to our Tri-Valley Athletic League on athletic fees. Moving to capital budget. Our base capital budget is increased from $1,017,000 to $1,140,000, and we have shifted some funds a little bit. In particular, I want to identify that we are thinking about furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And one of the ways that we are trying to alleviate a little bit of pressure on the operating budget is there are certain things that have a significant lifespan that are educational equipment that really should be thought of as capital expenses. I think the way that I've talked about this is in a science lab. You know, I'm not going to say one beaker would go on a capital list, right? But like the beakers are capital, but the chemicals are not. But if we have, for example, a machine that we bring in and is going to help in our science equipment, we want to make sure that we can do this in an appropriate way in capital, because those expenses don't happen from one year to the next necessarily. In terms of this capital budget, here's a list of planned projects. I'm not going to read each of these to you one at a time. I'm excited that we're currently in the procurement phase to try to get an OPM in coordination with the town to help with a number of our capital projects to make sure we can have quality coordination and that our projects are done well. So I'm excited for that collaboration for an on-call OPM services. We also do have an additional capital article that's going forward. This is for an electrical sub-panel upgrade at Sheehan. We are still and nearing completion of the master planning study on the school side. I anticipate in the next month and a half or 2 months that we'll be doing a public release of that. At the same time, from the work that our engineers, both prior to Doran Whittier coming in and doing our facility study work, SMA prior to that, and then Doran Whittier said this needs to be done regardless of what the future of Sheehan is. We have a whole generation of kids coming through that building. That sub-panel needs to be replaced. It rose to the top of our priorities. The estimated budget is $530,000. The specs are complete, and we're going to be doing that work that summer if approved by town meeting. And then finally, just some things about comparisons and future priorities. Here's where we are. I know this chart has been shown in previous years. If you look at the top public high schools from the most recent rankings, and that green star sort of in the middle-ish area is what our per pupil spending looks like. And our priorities, we need to think about what a permanent additional preschool classroom would look like. Using the kindergarten classroom at Pine Hill is not necessarily a permanent solution. I mentioned our additional need for student mental health support. A district data analyst. There is a lot, and it's one of our priorities in our strategic improvement plan, is to really focus on the use of data to improve both educational outcomes and other outcomes in the district. And then enrollment-driven increase. We benefited this year from the distribution of students at the elementary level for how they were distributed by school and by grade levels. But when we look at a 10-year enrollment projection, we do see that we're going to have an increase in elementary students coming in the near future. And so we need to be responsive to that need and bring back some of the positions that we are reducing in this year's budget. And over the next 10 years, most likely need to add more. And then utility costs are escalating. We don't have a year's worth of actuals at Pine Hill yet with the energy efficiency we've put in there. I'm really excited to announce that just a couple of days ago that we were certified as LEED Gold for Pine Hill. The initial aim was LEED Silver. We came in as LEED Gold for environmental efficiency in that building. And so I'm really excited about that, but it's tough to project not having a year's worth of actuals yet. So we're going to have some drivers in FY27 there. And with that being said, I think I've talked a lot, and for anybody that managed to listen to every last detail all the way through, I really appreciate it. And then I would just ask Lemma or Tony if they have anything to add at this time.
You got all of the things.
Thanks, Lemma.
Yeah, I guess I just have one. I kind of reflected this at last week's or 2 weeks ago school committee. I've been on school committee now 9 years, so I'm a bit of the historian. My gray hair is starting to show, but just a bit of history. I know some of you knew, but like the last 3 years have been, as I talked the other day, pulling kind of rabbits out of a hat. We've actually been below level services for 3 years now. 3 years ago, we did it through Chapter 70 money. Last year, we did it through Hanlon consolidation money. This year, we did it through the fact that we had basically reduced enrollment and teachers. And so I just I want to raise it not to be the bearer of bad news, but I don't know how long this is sustainable. We had to make some difficult decisions in cutting Mandarin. If we have continued high inflation, if we have the enrollment goes up, it's not sustainable. And so I just want to kind of lay that out because that was something we talked about at the school committee last week. So.
Thank you, Tony.
I think Margaret, you had a
just
question.
a
If you want to
question.
ask Tim.
On the list of funds, you had listed federal grants. What does the environment look like for those coming through? Are they at risk or are they pretty much guaranteed?
Yeah, so for FY26, we're in a good shape. I don't know what's going to happen beyond FY26. I really can't anticipate our largest federal grant that comes in is the IDEA grant, which goes towards special education. I really don't envision a scenario where IDEA is going to get reduced or IDEA is going to go away. There's a question of whether or not to make it reduced, and we will have to deal with that if that's the case. But I don't see that scenario. I think the grant that impacts the most, and by the way, our funds do not come directly from the federal government. They're passed through the State Department of Ed to us. The one entitlement grant that I think is at the most danger is Title I, but it's not a grant that we receive. That's dedicated to communities that have higher percentages of low-income students or economically disadvantaged students. We don't receive any Title I funding. You saw, I think, in the slides about an $1,100 increase in Title II. That's for teacher quality. That's another one that may disappear, but I mean, it's what, 15, 20,000. The grant is a total lemma somewhere in that range. It would be impactful, and that would, impact some of our professional development efforts for staff. But that's not a catastrophic issue. But yeah, no, it's something we're certainly keeping an eye on without question. And our state superintendents association is working with the National Superintendents Association, who has a really strong lobbying arm in Washington. And we're certainly keeping an eye on this going forward.
Thanks.
Anyone else have questions?
Tim, I do.
Budget or anything Tim walked through?
Yeah, Tim, I've got a quick question. We had our subcommittee meeting, not with the schools, but with municipal earlier this week. And in the past, there have been some roles where there have been a split between budgets, where municipal has carried a certain percentage and schools have carried a certain percentage. One example was an IT resource. This year, that IT resource is the school budget is no longer accounting for any of that. It's all on the municipal side. You know, Tony, I totally agree. You know, we've been somehow, some way, you know, thanks to Lemma, thanks to Tim and the broader administration and the school committee, you know, getting by. Sustaining going forward is going to be really, really hard. Are there opportunities for that type of sharing, even though we've gone away from it in that particular case of the IT resource? Are there opportunities where we can look at roles, and if they're not 100% utilized, could we potentially, you know, look at sharing across different departments?
There are a couple of challenges with that. I mean, and I want to acknowledge, right, an opportunity for collaborations like the OPM, on-call OPM stuff that we're doing right now. Like, that's a real good opportunity. The fact that we've contracted with the same firm for doing our master planning study, right? Like, that's a really good thing. The person needs to actually live in one house or the other. There are some pieces around the state ethics law where you can't have two contracts with the same municipality. So the person would either need to be a full-time school employee or a full-time town employee, and whether or not there's an offset associated with that is an issue. Then you wind up with issues of what does the supervision look like? What are the collective bargaining units they're a part of? So there's some really serious logistical challenge. If the timing is right and the opportunity is right, but it's got to be worth all those extra hurdles that make it more challenging to actually have it be effective.
Got it. No, thanks. That clarification is great. Now, with that said, in a gnarly process, you know, interesting times create some interesting scenarios. And so, you know, if there are resources and we're looking, for instance, to cut, you know, maybe the extra lift is worth it as opposed to completely cutting a resource if we could potentially share it across departments.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Susan,
you had a question?
Yes, I just have a quick question. Tim, thanks for your presentation. I saw that it looks like in terms of some capital projects, I think I saw a couple of roof projects listed, and was just curious if you are pursuing, I believe the School Building Authority has an accelerated repair program. So if that's something that you've looked into.
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at it. There's not an application pending on that. I think we are the outcrop of our master facility study. I think we're trying to make sure that we prioritize those projects that are going to be the most bang for the buck at the MSBA. And so we don't want to use necessarily our political capital on a smaller project when we're trying to save up for a bigger one. By the way, I do want to, because I heard some of the conversation before the meeting started, just to clarify what happened at Thurston today. It was ice melting on the roof. That's what caused the leak in the cafeteria. So we'll be back in operation for tomorrow. There were no pipes, anything like that. So I do want to clarify that.
Tim, one thing I would flag is that the accelerated repair program was suspended or paused for a short time by the MSBA. And that was when we were, planning for and thinking about the Thurston and the high school roof that are the first ones that we'd like to tackle. But the other piece is just like awaiting the findings and the insights that come out of the facilities master plan and thinking about which next large projects would be the ones to go for, at which point we can consider whether it's appropriate to pursue those dollars again.
Thank you.
Thanks. Does you have other questions? I don't see any hands raised right now.
Tim, last May, the town approved a
George.
high school roofing project. Is that accomplished?
That work is going to be happening this summer.
Yes, we are currently, we've issued an IFB and we're waiting for bids associated with that high school roof project. And this is part of the reason why we wanted to put out an RFQ to seek an OPM that could be available for us to partner with so that we can have supervision of the project when it's underway.
All right, that's great. Lemma, do you think that the project is still going to come with under what the town has approved?
I sure hope so. We have not gotten any signals that that will be a concern, but I would say that there are costs associated with this project that aren't entirely just about what is contracted with the roofer. Because we have solar panels on the high school roof as well as the Thurston roof, and those solar panels need to be removed. So we are currently working with Amoresco to get an estimate for the cost of removal. And during the time period of removal, we lose revenue from those panels. So that's part of the cost of the project as well. So we're waiting to calculate all of those impacts and trying to think about how to schedule it to have the least possible impact. And to manage both parties, right? Amoresco and the roofing contractor.
And Lemma, do you want to give an update on the canopy project? Because that's on scope for this summer as well, right?
Yes, it's true. So that's another important reason why we'd like to have an OPM around for the summer is the coordination of multiple efforts and multiple projects on the high school campus. So but we are still anticipating that Amoresco will be constructing the solar canopy in the student lot at the high school. And they've said that they are on schedule. They've completed the design, they've gotten the planning board approval, of course, and now they are planning to purchase steel in the coming weeks, and then they anticipate the steel would be shipped or arrive on site in mid-July. With some work done before then, as soon as students get out, we can expect to see Amoresco on site starting to do the prep work there.
Thanks, George, Laham, Thurston. Your turn.
No, I wasn't. I'm not gonna beat Tim too much up on the middle school and mention that this is the third time that there's been a disruption and twice the kids have been sent home. I'm more gonna ask.
Sorry, can I clarify? Nobody was sent home today.
No, not today. The two
Okay.
times before
Yeah, yeah.
where there was the gas leak, where they were evacuated to the high school or the other. I'm not asking about that. I was more asking. I know there's a capital study, and this is kind of a question that is a loaded, bundled question. You know, everybody knows we're working on the fire station this year. And I'm not projecting, I'm just saying if it goes through, it would most likely require an override. Now, the high school was the last override we had. Where are we on the capital study or the capital asset study? Because it looks like, you know, say we do the fire station this year, we got the Sheehan on the pipeline, we got Thurston on the pipeline. Where are things on the capital study? That's my tough question. And I have two other easy questions.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we anticipate that we're going to be releasing the findings of the capital study the next month and a half to 2 months, certainly by the end of April, is the plan with that. At that time, we will have a sense of what some options are. And we want to make sure that we are continuing to have conversations and have had them. And I see, Rob here, we had a meeting about a month ago, just trying to make sure there's some coordination between school department and municipal departments, knowing that we want them to be, I can't think of the word here. We don't want them to be competing priorities. We want them to be priorities that are able to coordinate well with one another. So, I mean, I will say, like, if we're talking about when, if funding were not an issue, right? And we were able to say, we want to build a new, and I'm just going to say Downey because nobody's talking about building a new Downey. So I don't want to tip my hand as to sort of what the study's going to say.
Let's say $150 million new middle school.
Sure, something like that, right? So if we want to do that and we were going through the MSBA, from submission to the MSBA to opening, it's about a 6-year process.
Jesus.
Just to give some context of what that timeline looks like.
And with any project of the school, there is the issue of displacement.
Yeah, so I don't want to preempt what's going to come out of the facility study.
Okay.
But I will say that those are things that we are considering in that process, and what the available land is, particularly adjacent to existing buildings, because we do want to try to minimize the disruption in any plans for students while we're in any sort of construction phase.
Right.
I will tell you just from previous experience, I mean, I was involved in a high school project where the new building and the old building were 3 feet apart in the closest place. So it can be done, and it is not as tight as you might think in some of our properties here.
All right, I guess the softball
No, hey,
question.
hold on one sec, George. George, before you go to the softball questions, Rob, do you want to make a comment on the feasibility study?
Thank you. Yeah, Mike, I did. And George, thanks for the question. Obviously, you know, I've said this before in front of this group, and it's something that I really feel very strongly about. Part of the reason we did this as a comprehensive study is we know the list is going to be longer than the resource available to address, right? So what we are committed to is a collaborative conversation about how do we creatively and efficiently solve as many of the problems that this list identifies based on urgency, based on cost, based on a whole bunch of different things. How do we go through this in a way that allows us to get as many of the issues addressed as efficiently and as effectively as possible? And that's gonna require a pretty broad conversation involving both the municipal side and the school side, and the community as a whole.
Yeah, it's going to become a systematic override on multiple years. Should I do the softball questions now, Mike?
No, this is great. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure Rob had a chance to touch on that.
Tim, on the slide that you said, how do we build the proposed fiscal year 26 budget? You note 85.3% are salaries, 69.9% of those are teachers. Those 69.9%, those are all union previously established contracts, correct?
Correct.
All right. And my other question is on the proposed fiscal year 26 budget enrollment. This is just a me not understanding. Let's say I have, and I don't, but let's say, thank God, I have a kindergartner, and she's going to be a kindergartner starting in September of 25. Is that what the 38 class size is, or is she in a different category?
If you have a student starting in September of 25 on that chart, that's the K row. So
Okay.
where it says 38 parentheses 2, that would be 2 classrooms of 19 essentially.
All right. And
38 is the
say,
total number of students, and the parentheses is how many sections accommodate those number of students.
and laterally, if I had a second grader going in September, it's 47 with the 3 classrooms.
Correct.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We'll beat you up more on the subcommittee meeting.
Can't wait.
Any other questions from the group?
No, Bill, there was one hand raised in the non-panelist members. That person has since dropped their hand and is no longer in the waiting room. If any of the people that are not panelists want to ask a physical question, if you could please make that request with your address in the chat, and then we would promote you and you could ask a question.
Thanks, Mike. All right, I think we're good with schools for now. Thanks, Tim, Emma, Tony, for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks all for having us. Appreciate it.
Next up, Allison, let's let in Ellen, Elijah. I think Nora's already in. So we'll let in the planning board and folks, and we will go to the planning board articles next.
Good evening. How is everybody?
Doing well. Hello,
Good.
Ellen.
How are you doing?
Thank you for having us. And I'm 90% sure we have a quorum of board members because this is meant to be a continuation of our public hearing as well.
And as long as Sean Weller, there were 2 of you. So Sean, if you could just make sure that you're in. One is in and one is,
Yeah,
we might have promoted the wrong one.
I see Sean Weller. I thought I saw Phil Giordano. Hey, Phil. And
Phil's
Josh.
there.
Okay.
There's Sean.
So,
There's Josh. Yeah.
so I do have a
If
quorum.
we can also,
sorry.
if we could also promote Amanda Wolf, our housing and land use planner.
I'm here.
She's here.
Oh, great.
All right, so it looks like I have a quorum of board members. Kate will not be able to join us tonight, and I do have staff. So if I may, we have a little bit of business to conduct before we, thank you. All right, at this
Floor is
time, I
yours.
would like, thank you. I would like to call the February 25th, 2025 meeting of the Westwood Planning Board to order. I will take a roll call for attendance. Phil Giordano,
I'm here.
Sean Weller,
Here.
Josh Ames.
Here.
I'm Ellen Rawlings. I'm here. We're also joined by Nora Loughnane, our Director of Community and Economic Development, Amanda Wolf, our Housing and Land Use Planner, and Elijah Romulus, our Town Planner. At this time, I would ask from one of my board members for a motion to reopen the public hearing on the proposed warrant articles for the Springtown meeting.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take roll call. Sean?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Josh?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. That motion carries. So then our first and really only agenda item would be the public hearing for the zoning bylaw, zoning map amendment articles for May 2025 annual town meeting, continued from February 11th, 25, including potential amendments to zoning bylaw relative to accessory apartments, potential amendments to zoning bylaw relative to affordable housing, potential amendments to zoning bylaw relative to underlying zoning district designation of parcel on Providence Highway, potential amendments to zoning bylaw and or zoning map relative to mixed-use multifamily residential overlay district, potential amendments to zoning bylaw relative to administrative office research, ARO zoning district, potential housekeeping amendments to zoning bylaw, and potential zoning bylaw amendments relative to major business development, MBD. All right, thank you. That's all we had to do. So now Elijah and I have a presentation for you on our proposed warrant articles.
Sounds good. So we'll go article by article, and then you can ask the group for questions, and we'll take questions from the public at the end.
Ellen,
Thank you.
Will you be sharing your screen, or Elijah?
I think Elijah will be.
Great. So
Thank you.
Allison, if you could share, I may allow him to share his screen. We can see it.
All right. Start.
Perfect.
All right. So this is for our proposed warrant articles. I will start with PB-1, accessory apartments. So there have been a few updates since the last meeting with FinCom. Just for those that are joining or hearing this for the first time. So on August 6, 2024, there was an act enacted by Governor Healy that amends the Zoning Act, and it allows ADUs up to 900 square feet to be built by right in single-family zoning districts. This was in part enacted to address the rising housing costs and the housing crisis that's experienced across the Commonwealth. This went into effect February 2nd, 2025, and so it makes it imperative for us to, propose this article in order for us to have some control on the ADUs moving forward. The law itself calls for protected use accessory dwelling units, as you can see laid out here, again, to encourage addressing the needs for housing options in the state. The regulations were finalized on January 31st, 2025. The key components of this really are that accessory dwelling units are on the same lot as the principal dwelling. They are subject otherwise to applicable dimensional and parking requirements that they maintain a separate entrance, either directly from the outside or through an entry hall or corridor shared with the principal dwelling, sufficient to meet the requirements of the state building code for safe egress, is not larger in gross floor area than half the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller, and is subject to such additional restrictions as may be imposed by a municipality, including but not limited to additional size restrictions and restrictions or prohibitions on short-term rentals. No municipality shall reasonably restrict the creation of a rental or an accessory dwelling unit that is not a short-term rental. And so the regulations, as I said, were finalized at the end of January. Pretty much the components of it are that one ADU on a single family property is by right. The owner occupancy requirement has been struck from the ability to enact. Parking, as it relates to parking, you cannot require off-street parking within half a mile of a transit station, or more than one on or off-street parking space for all other ADUs. Protected use ADUs can either be part of the principal dwelling or detached. The pictures over here kind of show that either it's completely detached, attached to the main structure, potentially in the interior as an upper level unit or a lower level unit. If you think attic space or basement space, it can be above a garage unit like a loft, or a complete garage conversion. And then density caps and unit caps as it relates to protected ADUs cannot be enacted. And so what does that mean for us? We are looking to amend section 8.5 along with section 2, the definitions. And that looks to rename accessory apartments to accessory dwelling units. Again, one protected use ADU will be allowed by right. Regardless, they will still be required to have a building permit and a certificate of occupancy. Any subsequent ADU would be via a special permit. There is the owner occupancy, as I mentioned before, will be removed. The floor area and parking requirements will be adjusted to conform with the law. And then the warrant article just being updated to meet some of the tweaks that HLC had made at the end of January. And that should cover the proposed Article 1.
Can I ask you a question, Elijah?
Yes.
Do you want to take questions now or wait until the end?
Yeah, it makes sense after each article to ask questions.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I agree. So thank you, Elijah. Question for you is, so the ADUs that are going to be permitted by right, they're going to be subject to the same zoning requirements that ADUs were subject to previous to this proposed article, right? Or are you changing? Go ahead.
As it relates to size, setback, anything of that nature, then it still has to meet those requirements. This is more related to, as I mentioned, removing the cap on ADUs or density requirements, the owner occupancy, and the allowance of one in any single family zoning district.
And not requiring any off-street parking within a half mile to a transit.
That's correct.
Yep.
So Elijah, does the state regulations make any distinction between a transit station and a transit stop? in my mind, there's a huge difference, and we only have one station. We've got multiple stops.
If I'm not mistaken, it's for any transit stop.
Does the regulation specifically say stop, or does it say station?
So any, basically access to a transit line, bus stop, train stop.
Is that defined in the, I mean, what I'm getting at is I would hope that the Westwood Planning Board would make clear in our own regulations that we don't have more than one station in this town. We only have one station. That's at 128 Railroad Station.
Well,
We
I
have
think
plenty of
I think the
stops.
Islington Center.
Yep.
Well, that's a good question, but I
That's a
think
stop, not a
Amanda
station.
has her hand up. Do you have some thoughts on that, Amanda?
Yes, so the regulations specifically outline what the definition of transit station is. And in the case of, without reading the full definition, it does include bus stops, commuter rail stations, subway stations, and I believe ferry stations, if that applies to you. So in the case of Westwood, that would mean both Islington Station and the Route 128 station would count, as well as all the stops on the 34E bus that goes down Washington Street.
Well, none of those are stations. They're all stops, but they're not stations.
Right.
So
I
the
mean,
yeah.
I just want to make sure that Westwood makes a distinction there, and we don't get hung up on making our off-street parking available when it really doesn't need to be available.
I guess that the question I would ask Amanda, is that really up to us, or is that it seems like it's
No.
pretty clear we have to
It's-
follow the state's definitions, yeah?
The term they use is transit station, and it specifically defines all of those things as a transit station. So we do not have any ability to regulate anything differently from that.
Well, there are a number of communities that are pushing back on the state Executive Office of Housing, and I would urge Westwood to do the same so we don't get turned involuntarily into an urban community.
So that is your opinion. However, we do have to follow what has been laid out in the rules and regulations in order for us to comply with the state law.
Any other questions on this article? I don't see any, so we can keep going, Elijah.
All right. So proposed article PB2, affordable housing. This again addresses some of the concerns as we had laid out, previously in addressing the housing crisis, looking to help residents experiencing housing instability. We recognize, over the years, the increases in area median income have led to, unaffordable rents, which were previously considered quote unquote affordable. The aim is to prevent displacement, homelessness, and reliance on assistance, to also increase housing choice options for income restricted households. You think of, teachers, public safety personnel, seniors, young professionals, single parents. And this follows through on the goal for the creating more housing choice as it relates to the comprehensive plan established in 2020. This also looks to eliminate repetitive language and to, change the name of what is now called Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, HLC. So what does that actually look like? So that would amend section 2.0 and various sections addressing affordability. One of the bigger changes that we've made since the last presentation is that The 80% AMI will be set for ownership units. We recognized in discussions that, anything lower, say 50 or 30% without any socioeconomic structures, such as like an affordable housing trust fund, without that would, set up homeowners for economic hardship. So we've set the affordable ownership units at 80%. And so this mix that is being presented is for rental units at 80% AMI, 50%, and 30. And in looking at that, there was a shift in the layout of how those units would be established. So again, it still fits with the 25 unit building. If that's being proposed, 4 of those units would be affordable, and within those 4 units, 2 would be at 80%, 1 at 50, and 1 at 30. As the units increase, it follows a pattern of 10. So if 10 units are needed in a building for affordability, so say 64 unit building, it would follow a pattern of, the first 2 are at 80%, the third is at 50%, the fourth is at 30%, and then the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th are at 80%. To further break that down, this shows a 25 unit building. There would still be 21 market rate units. What's currently in place shows that 4 are at 80%. And what's being proposed is that of those 4, 1 would be 50%, 1 would be 30%, 2 would still remain 80%. And to further demonstrate the pattern that we have proposed for that affordability, if a 64 unit building is being proposed, 10 of those units marked in orange are at 80%. What's being proposed is that of those 10 units, 1 would be 50% and 1 would be 30%. There would still be 54 units at market rate. And that is what I have for Article 2.
Thank you.
Thanks. Those visuals were great. Appreciate you making some of those updates. It gives a better picture of things overall. Do any folks have questions on this one? We've had some questions before, but let's see. All right, we can keep going, Eliza.
Yeah, no questions in the Q&A either. We're good.
All right. And so for proposed Article 3, this is looking to rezone the Lambert's Plaza, which is 216 to 310 Providence Highway. This request was made by the property owner. In the recent years, the ownership has changed hands, and the current owners were looking to alter the zoning because the current parcel is a pre-existing non-conforming use. The business use that is there, the highway business use that's there right now is non-conforming because it is a residential use, the single residence B district. And so this would align the parcel with the current commercial use. This encourages improvements and investments in the property for potential tenants of the building, but also in the event that the applicant looks to make upgrades to the site, this would help to alleviate some of the issues as it relates to light pollution or excessive lighting that's been mentioned in our previous hearing as it relates to residents living in the area, as well as some of the stormwater issues that were presented. Being able to upgrade a site that hasn't been touched in I want to say 30 plus years. So being able to bring that site up to today's standards as it relates to stormwater would greatly alleviate those concerns. And then general facade updates. The planning board felt like this proposal was in line with how the current site operates, and so they support that proposed article that was brought before them.
No
Thanks,
question.
Elijah.
Yeah, I think we're good.
All right. And then for proposed Article 4, the Mumford Overlay District, this the only change, this is really, I just want to emphasize it's a placeholder. There are no changes that we're making to this. We are currently waiting for HLC to make their determination on compliance. As of January 27th, they did confirm that we are in interim compliance. There were no issues that were mentioned in the application, and so we are awaiting their determination.
Good.
I can move on.
Yeah, good to roll. Yep.
And so this Article 5 is in relation to the ARO district, the Administrative Research Office District, to allow hotel use with the Zoning Board of Appeals special permit. Previously, we were contemplating the FMUOD, but ultimately the board felt like it would be best to look at amending the ARO district to allow for the hotel use, but also to look at restricting some of the residential uses as it relates to senior living facilities. And so this was a way to look to the future at what this site may be able to accommodate, and ultimately there's a concern that if there's a large residential structure that is that does go forward, that would impact the town's split tax rate.
I just want to raise to the commission's attention that we did get a letter from a resident, and this is the issue that that resident was talking to.
Yeah, Chris, I don't think we're not gonna read the letter, but if again, any of the public wants to address it, they can. If not, we'll move on.
No, I didn't mean for you to read the letter, Mike. I just want to make sure everyone recognized that the letter pertained to this warrant article.
Yeah, and Sandra, I don't know if you heard this originally, but if you want to be recognized to ask a question and not put the question in the Q&A, request that in the Q&A with your address, and then we'll move you into to be able to ask your question. I'll take that as you're asking to be moved in. So Sandra Castaldini, 54 Birch Street. So Allison, if you could move Sandra in, she can ask her question.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can indeed. Hi, Sandra.
Yes, we can
Hi,
hear you.
thanks. Sandra Castellini, 54 Birch Street. Thanks so much for Chris for mentioning this petition that came out from the East Street community. As you've read the material, there is concerns about why there's a need to be adding this extra use of a hotel to a property that is not for sale currently, is what we've been told. It will also impact the other ARO district across town, which is another parcel, and I'm not sure if that community is aware of this change. And it just feels like a lot of change, and there isn't a current reason for it. I know that in the same call we talked about giving a TIF to a hotel on University Ave, and so why are we so concerned about making sure that this property might end up being a hotel if we have a hotel that can't even get off the ground, on University Ave, which is a much more appropriate place for a hotel in Westwood rather than adjacent to a residential neighborhood and an elementary school. So we just feel like this needs to be vetted more, and that we respectfully ask for you to take it off the warrant articles for this year's town meeting.
I don't know if any of the planning board or Rob want to tackle that, but
Elijah, do you want to speak to that? Do you want me to speak to that?
You can go for it, Ellen.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you, Sandra. And planning board did receive, I think it was the same letter that Chris was referring to, because I noticed it was addressed to both boards. So thank you for that. I think, and you came to our last meeting too. I think a lot of your neighbors came, and we appreciate that. We definitely want to hear about the concerns as we continue to explore this article. I think, as far as I can't speak to the TIF because that's outside of planning board, but I think I understand the concern. I think the board understands the concern of losing that property from the commercial tax base. But I think we also heard the concerns of the neighborhood and are trying to kind of reconcile the two as we move forward with looking at the best possible way to incentivize that property for redevelopment if redevelopment were ever to happen. And I see Amanda's hands up, and Nora's hand as well. So, I'm speaking like as a board member, but it sounds like there are other people who, and I see Allison McCarthy as well, but I don't know, Nora or Amanda, whoever wants to go first.
before we go to Amanda and Nora, just Allison, is there a procedural thing that you want to touch on real quick?
No, I actually live in the neighborhood and wanted to add something.
Oh, well, there you go. Okay, sorry about that. Let's go. You're third, so let's go Amanda, then Nora, and then Alice.
So I just wanted to provide some insight in the form of numbers that might be helpful for people to understand why adding a hotel use is beneficial to the town. So if you look at fiscal year 24, the levy increase was 8%, but the average residential tax bill went up 12% because we have such a limited commercial tax base. And with hotels, you also get meals tax and hotel tax. So you get additional on top of the property taxes. So this was an opportunity to offset the cost to residents.
Thanks, Amanda. Nora?
Nora?
I just want to add a couple of more points for everyone to understand. The property has been vacant for a number of years. I believe it's going on 5 years since that was an active commercial use property. The property is owned by Meditech. Meditech has not, to my knowledge, offered the property for sale yet, but there is a quiet shopping of the property going on. And I have personally heard from 3 separate developers that are interested in developing this for residential use. All of the proposals would be for between 250 and 300 units of residential use. So quite different use than what is there now. Those are permitted uses within the ARO zone. You can develop residential use either as a residential retirement community or as assisted living or a nursing home. All of those uses are a possibility, and that's what people seem to be interested in developing this for. So the proposal before the planning board is to try and protect this property by limiting the residential uses that are permitted and by encouraging commercial uses. So to give you an idea of the types of commercial uses, types of all uses that are allowed in the ARO district. Right now, you can have a professional services establishment, business services establishment, an office of a healthcare professional. You can also have a medical marijuana establishment, research and development, a golf course, a campground, wildlife preserve, fishing grounds, nonprofit or religious. You could have a commercial indoor recreational facility, so something like a Jillian's or something along those lines, a Dave and Buster's. You can have an educational use that's exempt of any size and any type. You can also have a childcare facility in a new building. You could have any type of solar, including large-scale solar farm. You could have a residential retirement community, a nursing home, or assisted living residence. And then other uses, municipal facilities, a public utility like the Eversource building, or an active generation plant are also allowed uses. So the ARO district is extremely comprehensive in the uses that are permitted there now. But for some reason, you can't have a hotel. Hotels are only permitted in Westwood, in the industrial and in the industrial office district. So the proposal is to add hotel, which is a use that goes more in line with the other uses that are permitted in this district than it does in, for instance, the industrial district where it's currently allowed. So the planning board is considering this. They're considering the hotel use to incentivize commercial use of the property, and they're considering reductions in the allowed residential use through nursing home or assisted living facilities. I don't want anyone to think that this couldn't happen. As I said, there are 3 developers that are currently looking at the property, and any one of them could file an application with the support of the property owner. I have not spoken to the property owner, but if they're interested in selling, then there are developers who are out there interested in developing this property.
Thanks, Nora. So Allison, I'll let you go next, and Sandra, and then I have a question in the chat after that.
So if we make this change.
Allison, I know we know you, but could you?
Oh, yes,
you're
I would
acting
be
as a-
speaking on behalf of the public. I live at 24 Larch Street, and this is not a part of the Finance and Warrant Commission. That's separate. So public comment. There's no like there's no space between this property and the neighborhood. When a developer comes in, is there like, I don't even know what I want to say. I'm sorry. My words are escaping me. But like, would there be like a special like, oh gosh, I don't know how to say this.
May I respond to what I think you're asking?
Buffer?
Yes,
Buffer
Nora,
zone?
help me out. I
Yes.
think you know where I'm going with this.
Yes. So many of the uses in the ARO are permitted by right, and there would be no opportunity to enforce a buffer zone. Those uses would be something like professional offices, business use, medical marijuana establishment, medical marijuana establishment, commercial recreation do require a zoning board special permit. So would a hotel. So would a nursing home or assisted living facility. Those are all special permit uses. And since the zoning board has the opportunity to review a project and decide if it's allowed or not by special permit, they would have the authority to impose a buffer zone. If you look at the ARO district off of Lauterbrook, where Fox Hill Village is, Fox Hill Village was developed with a zoning board special permit approval, and large buffer zones were enforced by the zoning board. So anything that's a special permit use, like the hotel is proposed to be, could have a buffer enforced by the zoning board.
Thank you, Nora. That was exactly what I wanted to hear.
Phil, you had your hand raised. Did you have anything else?
Just briefly,
One of the things I just wanted to make sure that was emphasized is the planning board gives great deal of consideration to traffic, impact on neighbors, all the kinds of things. If anyone has ever watched or attended any of our meetings, we take that into great account. The current use is a commercial use, and we are sensitive certainly to the town and the neighbors and the abutters, but also sensitive to some of the increasing pressures on the budget. And one of the any of the uses that come through, and none of them are coming through at the moment, but we're trying to be a little bit proactive and give consideration to what could be to the benefit of the town, while also being sensitive to the people in the neighborhood as to possible uses. Rest assured, the planning board will give it great consideration.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Phil.
Sandra?
Sandra, did you have another question?
Hi, I just wanted to respond to some of the comments, and I really appreciate it, and I'm glad it's been, given a lot of thought. I don't have any problem with the restricting portion of this potential warrant, but just the addition of a hotel. I just don't know how we can, on one hand, be talking about giving tax breaks because a hotel can't get off the ground in a different part of Westwood, and on the other hand, adding the zoning for hotel. I mean, have we reviewed every commercial property within the zoning of Westwood and thought proactively to add hotel to make sure that we can maximize our commercial tax base? I just don't know why, maybe we got some phone calls about this particular space, which isn't currently for sale, but my concern is this is kind of getting slipped in right before warrants are getting finalized. And, we're already, I don't know if Fox Hill Village is aware that this would be taken into consideration for both the ARO district next to East Street, as well as the one where Fox Hill Village is. So then that would change that zoning to automatically include a potential, hotel. So I just don't think this idea has been fully vetted. I can appreciate being in the finance world, being proactive and wanting to keep our, commercial tax base. I just think that for some reason, this particular property is being incentivized, and we haven't really considered all the factors, and it doesn't kind of seem equal and fair.
If I
Yes,
could
and
respond to that, I just
Laura,
wanted
do
to
you
make
wanna-
it clear that the planning board is looking at every commercial property in town, and properties that are within the industrial district or the industrial office district already have the opportunity for a hotel by zoning board special permit, which is what we're suggesting here, as do properties in certain FMUOD districts. For some reason, the ARO district was never given the opportunity to have a hotel. And the planning board is considering offering that as an option for voters to consider.
yeah, and so I just want to add, the FinCom has been very aware of this article. So this isn't new tonight. This has been presented from the very beginning of planning board's presentations.
Yeah, we had public comment for the first time on it last month or earlier, maybe like 3 weeks ago. And I think the first time it was discussed was in January. So this is fairly new.
This has been discussed in the planning board prior to January. This was discussed back in November, December. So there's been a lot of discussion in the planning board meetings also.
Yeah, I was trying to go back on some of the recordings and I didn't quite see it in November, and I know that was quoted previously, so I just wanted to make sure. I wanted to just provide my concern, and I appreciate the opportunity to add some comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra. Bill, do you want me to read the question?
I will, 1 second, and then I'll see you can move Sandra back to attendee. So there's a question in the chat I'll read. I will remind people your question will not be read if you do not identify your name and address. So this is from Doug Cross, 135 Elm Street. The question is, wouldn't the restriction on beds per acre prevent this from becoming residential without allowing for hotels? I think you can probably take that, Nora.
So there is a restriction on beds per acre currently if it's being developed as a residential retirement community. Residential retirement community on a property of this size would allow either independent living units, up to 76 independent living units, and those could be individual houses all on the lot, or they could be a single building or multiple buildings with 76 units. It would also allow nursing home beds within a residential retirement community. They would be pretty strictly limited to only about 23 beds under that section of the zoning board bylaw. However, an assisted living facility or a nursing home develops not through a special permit under the residential retirement community, but just through our bylaw, which is permissible in the ARO zone, does not have any limit on the number of beds or the number of units. So a 250 unit assisted living facility is not at all out of the realm of possibility. The way that that type of use would be limited is by provisions in our bylaw that affect the setbacks, the height of the building, the floor area ratio. And to give you an idea of what that is, in the residential retirement community, a building can be up to 65 feet tall. And so as I mentioned, it could be individual lots or it could be a single large building. In the assisted living and nursing home provisions in the zoning bylaw, the building height would be 45 feet, so essentially a 4-story building. But the floor area ratio could be as high as 0.8. And what that means is on this 15-acre site, if it was developed as a single-story building, the building itself could have a footprint of up to 12 acres. A 2-story building up to 6 acres, a 4-story building up to 3 acres. So it's the dimensional requirements that would dictate how many units you could actually get. Then you'd have to provide parking for the units. So the proposals that people have asked about, and we don't have plans, we don't have applications, we just have questions. But those proposals range from 250 to 300 units of assisted living.
Thanks, Nora. Does anyone else on the FinCom have a question?
Thanks to all the residents for sending in the letter to both the planning board and FinCom. It was certainly read and considered.
Oh, Allison, can you appoint Kim Cross or to a panelist? I think there's additional question.
I think it might still be Doug, but we'll see which if it's Kim or Doug.
Okay, you should be on.
Can you guys hear me?
We can indeed.
Yep.
Yeah, this is Doug Cross, 135 Elm Street. I feel like the question I asked, though, wasn't necessarily answered. I know if we put in those restrictive beds per unit, then we wouldn't have the fear of losing the property to a residential zoning. We still keep it as a commercial tax base without having to zone it for a hotel. I believe the planning board, Nora might have actually said that in the last call on the 11th, that putting in these restrictive measures would make it not financially feasible for any sort of larger scale residential or nurse assisted living place to go in there. So why wouldn't we be able to just keep those two restrictions without adding on to the hotel?
The planning board could choose to do that. I think that they are so far looking at not only disincentivizing commercial, non-commercial uses, but incentivizing commercial unit uses at the same time. Keep in mind that the restriction that the planning board is proposing, where it limits the number of assisted living units by the size of the property, similar to the restrictions that are currently in place for residential retirement community, those would limit it, but they would not eliminate the use. So currently, you could have a residential retirement community, or under the proposed changes the planning board have, you could still have an assisted living community or a nursing home. They would just be smaller than they would otherwise be without restrictions. So I think the planning board is very interested in imposing restrictions, but they're also interested in incentivizing other commercial uses, and the hotel is a specific commercial use. So in answer to your question, yes, the planning board could choose to de-incentivize the residential uses by imposing the limits that are in their current draft bylaw now and not adding hotel. They could choose to do that. I think at the discussions they've had so far, they were looking to do both.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. That's the question. Nora. Anything else in Q&A? I think we can go on to the last one.
All right. We have two remaining articles.
Oh, sorry, two more.
Yeah, no problem. The proposed Article 6. This one is kind of a standard that we include over the years for housekeeping amendments. Really, it's just to correct any grammatical errors or like a missing word in certain sections. So I would direct anyone to look at the long form notice to see some of the minor errors that were corrected as part of this article. And I can
fire one ready,
and we can go to the last one.
All right. And yes, so our last one is the proposed Article 7. This is to remove the major business development section of the bylaw. And so in reviewing our bylaw, we found that this section is outdated based on its intent. Some of the intent was to spur some economic development, but this kind of falls short in light of our newer overlay districts being the flexible multiple use overlay district, FMUOD, and our University Avenue mixed use district, UAMUD. Both of these spur the kind of business and development that was intended for this section. One of the larger issues is, not only were there some, I guess, clunky, for lack of a better term, segments of the article, like, allowing a 50,000 square foot restaurant or something of that nature, but it was updated in recent years to not only be this one section, but included in the use regulations. And it's worded in a way that poses a liability that could actually allow for uses that are not even allowed at all in our zoning bylaw. And so we just wanted to make sure that we, did not keep that kind of liability open and look to remove this section in its entirety.
Thanks, Elijah.
Thanks, Elijah.
So
any questions from the group on any of the planning board articles?
Bill, I just wanted to thank Elijah and Nora again for their their usual good presentations and helpful comments and answers to questions.
You're very welcome.
Bill, there is one
Mike has
question.
one more.
Yeah, there was one question. I just want to read it in, even though I've answered it for Fran Fusco, 20 Pine Lane. This is for the PB5. Can the Meditech property be developed into condos for 55 plus, like the green development off of Clapboard Tree? I answered, based on the current zoning, that is a viable option, and then I will let Nora validate.
Yes, it could be developed as condos up to 75 units on those, or 76 units on those 15 acres, as long as they're age restricted and approved by the zoning board as a residential retirement community special permit.
Great.
And just to give you an idea of what the density is, 76 units on that would be each unit on approximately 8,000 square feet. So a smaller lot than is typical in Westwood.
Nora, just to make myself feel better, I want to think that every time you speak, you're reading things, but I know you're not. So that is incredibly impressive.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for joining and kind of walking through that and answering questions. We appreciate it. We know how much work goes into all this. So thanks for kind of laying things out in a clear way for all of us. But I think I think you just have to close your meeting.
Do some business,
We
Ellen.
do. Yes, yes, thank you. Seeing no further public comment, nor any further questions or comments from board members at this time, I would entertain a motion to continue this public hearing to March 4th, 2025 at 7 p.m. via Zoom with links and call-in numbers to be posted on the calendar page of the town's website.
So moved.
So moved. Oh, second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take roll call. Josh?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries. Our public hearing is continued. Now I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on adjournment? Seeing none, I'll take roll call. Josh?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Planning board meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great night.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Next up on the agenda, chair's update. Should only take about 45 minutes. I should be done around 10 o'clock. All right, I got some smiles. There's some people still paying attention.
I wouldn't go into humor there,
just-
buddy.
Oh, yeah.
It's not on video. Just an update from my perspective, given how long this meeting is and the next meeting probably won't be as long. I think for our next meeting, we'll walk through all the warrant articles and just discuss assignments before we do our meeting in late March. So everyone kind of knows going into that, which articles. I think the planning committee should think about the planning board articles, and education might want to think about that capital article. So look at some of the articles that tie back to your committee. So we'll kind of walk through each one of them next week. We can talk about who wants to take each one, and we'll do that after the report outs next week. 2 weeks, I'm sorry. So in 2 weeks, again, we will have the committee report outs, and as I said before, just an executive summary format, a couple slides highlighting key things for everyone to know is all we need to walk through, so not the typical presentation of the past. So I think you guys can pull all that together and then send it to Allison. Allison, what's the 11th of Tuesday? So Allison, do you need it by Friday, so you can post them up in the site, right?
Yeah, Friday sounds good. So March
So if you can get
7th.
Yeah, so if you can
Yeah,
get 'em
March 7th.
to her by next Friday, she'll pull them all together into one presentation, and then she can post it up into the OneDrive for everyone. And I think, except for education, all committee meetings have been scheduled. I think we're still working on education. There's been some calendar issues there, so I think Allison's working tomorrow with all you and him and team to try to get that set. But that's the only one outstanding as far as I know from a committee standpoint. Mike, anything else?
Yeah,
you
but
wanna add?
I want to just build on the subcommittee meetings. So we had our first, well, not our first, but our meeting with municipal earlier this week. For the first time, we had public participation. So there were a couple of resident attendees. We didn't have in our agenda, any public participation, and so based on that being the first, I welcome the public participation and questions. With that said, it probably makes sense for us to address that, either include it in the agendas as we're posting these meetings or not. make them available certainly where the public could be there but not actively participating. That will be up to the individual subcommittee chairs. So just keep that in mind, and then also from a timing perspective, make sure that you're planning accordingly. The subcommittee meetings do not have to be in person. However, once we publish them as an in-person meeting, we don't have the ability to move them to a virtual meeting or to let individuals attend if they haven't followed through on a formal request to the town. So a little bit of procedural there. Just, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself, Bill, or Allison, and we can get you the right answers.
Just a quick question. Can these
Ryan.
meetings be mixed? Some of the people would be on Zoom and there would be one committee member there live so that if the public came, there's someone who anchors the meeting in the physical and the rest of the team are Zoom.
So
Or is it everyone physical or everyone Zoom? It's binary.
we could go hybrid, like we have with some of the FinCom meetings earlier in the year. Again, that we would just have to make sure that the meeting is announced accordingly.
Okay.
So it's
Brian, you had a
Margaret,
question?
it's some forethought there, and if you know that you can't be at a meeting, I would say that at least a week out, we've got to make sure that we lock all those details down.
Gotcha.
Cool, Ryan.
Like just as information, I think at some point in March, the hybrid meetings are no longer a thing, if you will. The governor, this was a COVID thing, that passed some legislation that I think expires in March. I'm not sure.
If only, Mike, you had somebody to ask that question to.
She's on the other side of the house. It'll take me a while to get there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
I think Mike's right. I think March 25th is the final date that allows towns to conduct Zoom meetings.
But is it? But is it?
March 25th, I believe.
But is it? I'm just kidding. No, like if it doesn't get extended, then absolutely, Chris, that makes sense.
Right. It's always subject to be extended.
Yeah. Ryan Sturma.
Yeah, Bill, Mike, quick question. I know in the mail, we received kind of a overall summary of notices, I believe it is, for the annual town meeting for the Finance and Warrants Commission. Just some first off, a question and then some broad feedback. First off, I'm just curious, like, how is that compiled? How is that, kind of approved and sent to the town? I'm just curious kind of, why we as the Finance and Warrants Committee, weren't reviewing that right before it went, circulated to the town. And the only reason I say that is some of the summaries, were pretty good, pretty clear. Others were very kind of more high level. And I was just curious in terms of like the procedures and, the who's reviewing it, who sends it out, and how does that work?
Yeah, the high level summaries are provided and put into the document. Allison helped pull it all together. Mike and I reviewed the note at the front of it. And it's kind of typical to send out a very high level thing. And then we focus more on the detail, obviously, when we write the articles. But it did come to Mike and I to review before it went out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not something that we, the announcement of the articles isn't something that we've typically brought before the broader FinCom. We're certainly, Ryan, gonna vet every single one of them, assuming that all of those articles make it to the actual, the final meeting.
Okay, sounds good.
Just to be clear, I didn't actually write those summaries. Those came from the town
Correct.
That's right.
to me.
You compiled everything.
Yes, I compiled. I composed and reread and
Yeah,
spelled.
but we reviewed them, Ryan, and if anything jumped out at us as a, kind of a mischaracterization, we certainly would have provided that feedback, and it would have been edited.
Yeah, okay, sounds good.
Bill, I do have one additional thing, and I don't know if this is necessarily part of my update as opposed to potentially, a topic that I want to address before the broader FinCom. So at the select board meeting last night, there was discussion around one of the citizen petition articles, specifically the 11th pickup of yard waste. And the article that will be before FinCom, and I'm not going to get into too much detail because Joe is not here to kind of ask this question, but I want to just talk about this as a FinCom. The approximately $25,000 to $30,000, or approximately $29,000 is the estimate for an 11th pickup. And there was a lot of great discussion back and forth between the select board. The thing I want to bring before the FinCom is that Todd and the Public Works are in the middle of a negotiation with Waste Management, and Todd believes that he can cover the additional pickup for a 1-year trial as part of his, effectively the buffer built into the contract into discretionary funds. I personally don't like that because if there is discretionary funds that would cover a $29,000 11th pickup, I would, because it's one time and we're doing a 1-year trial, I would rather fund that through a different funding source. And if there is savings that can be realized, I would rather not have the operational budget impacted by a potential one-time 11th pickup. So I just wanted to kick that around for a quick discussion as a FinCom, because as with open meeting law, we can't talk about this, outside of these meetings. So I want to throw that out there. I feel pretty strongly about this because I feel if we just bury it into the current, budget, the operational budget of the Public Works, that, it's going to be in perpetuity, that it'll roll forward. And so again, I'm not saying I'm against an 11th pickup. I'm ambivalent right now, but I would rather fund it through a one-time source.
Mike, is your question or your concern that there's some fat built into the budget? Or is your concern that if we bury it in the budget, it won't be an identifiable source? So going forward, we're going to be building it and rolling it as an issue.
If there's discretionary money in the budget, I would rather not spend that on an 11th pickup. If it is a one-time, I would rather, potentially not spend money that is part of an operational budget. So it's a little bit of both, George.
Because in my having some experience putting budgets together, you always put a little fat in the budget. That if you don't, you're setting yourself up for failure. But I do agree with you on the fact that you don't want to have this issue rolling forward from year to year. I think what Todd, and this is an opinion, I'm not speaking for anybody else but myself, I think what Todd may be doing here is setting it up so that it's not an ongoing thing, because to be honest, a pickup in July in my mind doesn't make sense. Because so he may be doing this to see, just how many people utilize it, and there may not be that many that would warrant a $25,000 expense.
There was great dialogue on that, and whether I'm for or against it. I think my bigger concern, George, is that I would rather go in and have discretionary funds as part of as his budget address something that is truly a oh boy, we missed it, as opposed
crap,
to
we missed something
that is a one-time that we've agreed on. The select board agreed on a one-time, so we don't have to necessarily fund this in perpetuity like the operational budget would suggest. So again, that's just my point of view, and I wanted to get some of the thoughts on the FinCom. I think Seth, you were next, and then Chris.
Seth was first, and Chris. Yep.
So what do we have for like the FinCom funds, and isn't this like a perfect use for that?
So there's free cash, there's the FinCom funds. So there are different funding sources. We don't have to dictate, by the way, in the article itself, the citizen petition article doesn't specify a funding source. So it's
I guess like, how do we have the FinCom funds? I haven't seen that used in my couple of years here. I don't know that process. It just seems like for a one-time use for a maybe needed budget item for something that falls well within, how do we offer that as a funding source? And then they can see if it's worthwhile. I know I'll use it, but they can see if it's worthwhile. They can see how it fits in the budget. They get a year to learn. Like, it seems like a natural use of that source.
Yeah.
So I just don't know how we propose offering that. So
Allison, before we go to Chris, can you let Rob back in just in case Rob has a answer to the procedural aspect of that? Because I don't know how we would select either FinCom funds, free cash, etc. Chris Brady, you may know the answer to that.
Well, it's funny, Mike, because it's almost like you were reading my mind. That's exactly one of the questions I wanted to bring up at tomorrow's subcommittee meeting with the public safety people. So we'll get that answer and we'll get it back to the FinCom. But if it's truly just a one-time thing, we can use free cash for it. But I agree with you that if it's going to be an ongoing thing, we can't use free cash. It has to be part of some operating budget. Last time, Stephanie presented the trash budget as a fixed cost, but she didn't say where it came from. She didn't say what department operating budget it came out of. So we're trying to get that resolved too.
Great. I
And
appreciate it.
and as far as the FinCom reserve, I believe that's used to print the town meeting books, maybe some training. A couple of years ago, some
You're
FinCom
correct.
training, that's what we use that for. So I'd be loath to offer that to the town for a trash pickup.
Well, yeah, I think the FinCom reserves is not used for the operation for the printing. That's part of our actual operational aspect. And there is a fund. We do have a FinCom reserve. So again, there are some funds that we theoretically could use. I don't know, Rob Gotti, if there's anything you want to add procedurally. If not, we don't have to, again, without Joe here, I don't want to open this up for dialogue of whether we're pro or con. I just want to procedurally make sure that we have a good guidance.
I would not want to comment on that tonight in this forum. I think we should have a conversation, with Stephanie and Chris as far as that goes. I may have a difference of opinion on, how we go about funding that as well. So, at this point, I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment as a standalone select board member.
No, that's fine. And so I just procedurally, I just wanted to, if you had an answer on how we would secure the funding source. But again, I wanted to bring this up because again, like you and the other select board members, we don't have the ability to talk about this outside of these meetings.
Respect that, absolutely.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rob. Bill, that's all I had. I just wanted to make sure that I got that one out there.
Thanks. Any other business or anything anybody wants to bring up before we go to old business? I see none.
I will.
So old business.
I will. I'll read a question or a comment from Nada 32 Webster Street. Myself, Michael Gay, and the entire FinCom membership have just violated the open meeting law by discussing a citizen petition and not having that topic on its agenda. I disagree because there is a section that is information that we as a FinCom want to discuss. And again, we discussed this in an open meeting. So, but I appreciate your point, Nada. I'm certainly made it very.
Mike,
go ahead.
I'll add the topic is on the agenda because we have all of the articles on the agenda as a topic. So either way you cut it, whether it's the agenda topic earlier or the agenda topic we're on right now, it's covered within our meeting agenda.
Yeah, more to the point of the question, again, to not anybody watching, again, not taking a position for or against, this is a funding source question. It's literally what FinCom needs to do, right? We need to figure out how we're going about, the warrants, the articles before us. And so, again, we don't have the luxury of taking this up as a FinCom outside of these meetings. So I appreciate the comment. And again, don't take my question as for or against the article, simply a funding source question.
So on old business, we won't have the minutes so before next meeting. So sometime next week, you'll get minutes for both meetings. Allison was away last week, so we weren't going to make her put together minutes in 24 hours or less. So we'll have 2 minutes to vote on. So I don't think there's any other old business for us to discuss. We've already gone through public comments. I don't think if nobody has anything else, then we can.
Next meeting is in person, Bill?
Yes, I believe so. In the library. So yeah, I guess I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. And then can we do roll call, Allison?
Certainly. Bill Bruce,
Yes.
Mike Gay,
Yes.
Alex Yale. Caitlin Jerzak,
Yes.
Christopher Marks,
Yes.
Chris Pareda,
Yes.
Christine Cannon,
Yes.
George Laham,
Yes.
George Maroon,
Yes.
John Carey,
Yes.
Margaret Driscoll,
Yes.
Mike Powers,
Yes.
Ryan Sturma,
Yes.
Seth Frederickson,
Yes.
Susan Flanagan Cahill.
Yes.
That's everyone.
All right. Well, thank you guys. See you in 2 weeks.